John and Sarah Miller and their 2 children, Emily and Zach, received an unexpected inheritance, an old house in the middle of the woods in Maine. They didn't know much about the relative who had left them the property, but the idea of spending the summer months in a quiet place among nature seemed tempting. They were tired of the city and wanted to enjoy some peace and quiet. The road to the house went through a thick forest. The narrow country road looped between tall trees, whose branches reached overhead, forming a dark green tunnel. As they went deeper into the forest, the silence became more and more noticeable. Every now and then, they could hear birds singing or the rustling of leaves in the wind. The atmosphere was both peaceful and alarming at the same time.
House of Shadows.
How much is left to go?
Just a little longer. The house should be at the end of this road.
John replied, checking the map on his phone. When they finally reached it, they saw an old house on a small hill next to the riverbank. The large 2-story mansion with its steep roof and faded shutters looked grand, but also intimidating. The grassy alley leading up to the house was covered with fallen leaves, and the front of the house was covered with a light coating of moss. The house seemed to be watching them from its tall windows, their dark panes reflecting the evening sun. The river behind the house was wide and calm. Its waters glistened in the last rays of the setting sun, and thick bushes and reeds grew along its banks. The water was quiet, but it was easy to hear the sound of the water moving. Every so often, the sound of wild ducks flying above the water was heard. The riverbank was covered with smooth stones, and in the distance, beyond the forest, there were high hills covered in dense woods. The area around it was pretty and wild, making it feel very isolated from the rest of the world.
It's much bigger than I thought it would be. It looks imposing,
Sarah said as she got out of the car and looked around the house. The house itself was impressive too. They walked into a big entrance hall with high ceilings and a huge chandelier covered in cobwebs. The walls were decorated with antique patterned wallpaper that seemed to come to life in the dim light. The floors were lined with wooden planks that creaked underfoot. The air smelled of old wood and dust. The living room was spacious, with large windows through which soft light poured in, illuminating massive armchairs and a sofa covered in worn leather. In the corner, there was a fireplace with a carved stone shelf. On the shelf, there were antique clocks and candlesticks. But what caught Sarah's attention most was the huge mirror on the far wall. The frame was decorated with intricate carvings of intertwining vines and strange figures.
Look at that mirror, John. It's strange. It's like it's looking right into your soul.
She whispered, not taking her eyes off its dark surface.
Antique. It seems rare. It must be worth a lot of money.
John stepped closer.
We're lucky to have this house. A couple of creaky floorboards can't compare. We need to get things sorted out.
He put his arm around her shoulders and kissed her on the forehead. But Sarah felt like the mirror was watching them. She stepped closer and carefully ran her finger along its cold surface. She thought the reflection trembled slightly, but she thought it was just from being tired after the long drive. Sarah felt a chill, but she ignored it. The kitchen was furnished with old-fashioned furniture, including solid wooden cabinets and a stone sink. In the corner, there was a large dining table with a white lace tablecloth that had yellowed over time. The children's rooms on the second floor were cozy, but a little gloomy because of the thick curtains on the windows. Emily chose the room that looked out over the garden, and Zach chose the room with the old wooden closet that had carved doors.
I want to sleep here. I might find some Trevors in here.
Zach said as he opened the closet doors and looked inside. The next day, as they were unpacking and putting things in order, they were visited by a neighbor, an elderly woman named Marjorie. She came to the wicket gate, watching Sarah hanging laundry.
Have you been here recently?
Yeah, I decided to spend a summer here. We inherited the house.
Be careful with this house, honey. The people who lived here before you are gone. No one knows what happened to them. The house, it's strange.
Thank you for the warning, but I'm sure everything will be fine.
Sarah said, trying to reassure her, though she sounded a little unsure. As night fell, the strange events began to multiply. The floorboards creaked as if someone was walking through the house, and in the mirror, Sarah sometimes saw subtle movements that shouldn't have been there. She tried to ignore it, but she felt more and more uneasy. After a couple of days, John began to notice that the mirror was attracting him. Sometimes he caught himself standing in front of it, staring at his own reflection longer than he wanted to. Sometimes the reflection seemed to have something moving in the background, but when he turned around, there was no one there. Probably just a play of light, he told himself, but he felt a strange smile spreading across his face. The summer in the old house, which was supposed to be calm and peaceful, quickly turned into something else. Within days of moving in, the Millers began to notice strange things. At first, it was small things like drafts that seemed to walk through the house, even though all the windows were closed, or strange sounds at night. But then things got really weird. One night, Sarah woke up to the sound of footsteps. They were quiet and careful, as if someone was walking down the hallway outside their bedroom door. John was sound asleep next to her, and Sarah decided not to wake him. She got out of bed and walked out into the hallway, trying not to make any noise. There was no one there, but the footsteps continued, now coming from the other end of the house. Sarah walked slowly towards the sound until it stopped at the door to the living room. She opened the door quietly and saw that the mirror against the far wall was shimmering strangely in the moonlight.
It's just old glass.
She whispered to herself, but she felt uneasy. She went back to the bedroom, but she couldn't fall asleep again. The next day, John noticed that his mood was changing. He was becoming irritable and moody. It felt like something invisible was making him feel bad. Sarah tried to talk to him, but he waved her off.
I'm just tired. I need to finish the renovations. I'm sure things will get better,
He said one evening as he laid out his tools. But it felt like the house didn't want to change. Whenever John started working on something, like lamps, doors, or windows, strange things would happen. Tools would disappear. His work wouldn't go as planned, and sometimes he would forget why he had started working on the project. But the real cause of his anxiety lay elsewhere. Every night, John would get out of bed and go down to the living room, where he would stare at the mirror for hours. It attracted him like a magnet. In the reflection, he saw himself, but something had changed. His gaze, his posture, his expression. It all seemed strange and scary. Sarah asked him once when she caught him looking at himself in the mirror.
Why do you come down at night?
I don't know, I just want to look.
Sarah also noticed that the children were acting strangely. Emily would often sit by the window and gaze sadly at the nearby river. Zach, on the other hand, was becoming more and more withdrawn, often refusing to play with his sister. Emily asked one day while sitting at the breakfast table,
Mom, did you see anyone by the river?
No. Why?
I think I saw someone at night. They were standing by the water and looking at our house.
Sarah felt scared. She knew something had to be done, but she didn't know what. Every day, the atmosphere at the house was becoming more tense. Zach was becoming more and more withdrawn and less visible. If before he was an active and friendly boy, now he began to avoid even the simplest conversations. He would often be found alone in his room, rarely answering questions, not joining his sister for dinner, and not responding when she called him to play. Instead, he just stayed quiet. Sarah noticed that his gaze had become empty and distant. It was as if he was seeing something that the rest of her couldn't see. She tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't. Meanwhile, the house continued to take its toll on John. He spent more and more time in the living room, sitting in front of the mirror. One night, Sarah found him there, sitting in the dark.
John, you're scaring me.
I'm just thinking.
He muttered under his breath, but his eyes remained fixed on the mirror. Sarah looked at the reflection. It looked strange, as if from another world. She noticed that the shadows behind John were moving, even though there was no wind.
John, we have to leave. This house is changing us.
No! We can't leave. This is our home.
Sarah knew it would be hard to convince him, but she felt that if they stayed, something terrible would happen. Every night, the house drew them deeper into its shadow, and Sarah couldn't figure out how to escape this nightmare. But she felt sure that the mirror was the key to their problems. One day, over dinner, Sarah tried to get John to talk to her again.
There's something off about you, John.
I don't know, Sarah. Something's wrong with that mirror. It's making me see things that aren't real.
His voice shook. John stood up and walked over to the mirror in the hallway. Sarah tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. He touched the mirror, and it began to wiggle, as if something inside it was moving. At that moment, Zach came back into the room, and when he saw the mirror, he started to whisper softly.
Kim, they came again.
Emily, noticing this, started screaming.
Mommy, they're all there, on the river. I can see them again.
Sarah looked out the window and saw something dark move in the water. Her mind was racing. She tried to walk over to her daughter, but her gaze fell back to the mirror. The reflection in it began to distort, as if the house itself had suddenly begun to curve and blur. Zach stood next to John, his eyes fixed on the scary thing. He stood there, not moving or responding to what was happening. At one point, his hand slowly reached for the mirror.
Zach, no! Zach, what are you doing?
She turned to her son in fear, but he didn't respond. Sarah felt a tightness in her soul as she watched Zach approach the mirror. His eyes had gone blank, and they no longer had that alive, bright look that her son had. Everything around him was becoming blurry, as if reality itself was beginning to distort. Her heart was beating rapidly, and she was confused, but she felt sure that the mirror was the cause of the strange events in the house.
Zach.
she whispered as she approached him. He didn't respond. Suddenly, an irresistible force pushed her away from Zach and the mirror. She could not reach Zach anymore, no matter how hard she tried. He was being affected by something invisible and terrible that was whispering to him and pulling him towards it. The mirror wasn't just reflecting him. It was beginning to swallow him up like a huge black hole. The shadow in the mirror grew, becoming more and more distinct. Zach slowly stepped forward, his body disappearing more and more with each step.
Zach, stop! Don't move!
Her voice was hoarse from fear, but her son didn't seem to hear her. His eyes showed fear, but something inside him, something dark, was pulling him toward the mirror. He almost completely disappeared in its reflection. His feet no longer touching the floor, and only his hands were still visible, frozen as if in slow motion. At that moment, something terrible happened. Before she could get there in time, Sarah saw a shadow emerge from the mirror, like an invisible hand. At first, the shadow was faint, but it became clearer, as if it was trying to pull something or someone out of the world of the living. Zach took a step forward and lost his balance, falling into the mirror. His body began to disappear, and despite his desperate look, as if he was struggling, he was almost swallowed up by the mirror.
No!
Sarah screamed, unable to stop it. Then she looked at John. He stood in a corner of the room, looking terrified but not moving. Sarah felt her heart tighten with worry. She hurried to the mirror, her eyes full of worry.
John, help me! He's disappearing. We have to do something.
Her voice sounded more desperate than ever. John's face looked serious and focused, but there was something strange in his eyes. Fear, and maybe resistance. Sarah noticed his hand shaking as he lifted it to the mirror.
Sarah, no. You don't understand. The mirror is more than just a mirror. It's part of this house.
At one point, Sarah grabbed an old candlestick and tried to break the mirror, but John grabbed her arm and pushed her back.
No, Sarah, don't touch it!
His voice was full of desperate determination, and there was terror in his eyes, mixed with a kind of strange incomprehension.
He's disappearing. John, can't you see?
You don't understand. We can't destroy the mirror.
He's disappearing! John! Can't you see?
I know what you're going through, but this won't solve anything.
John continued to stand in front of her, his face showing fear and a struggle for control. Sarah felt her heart breaking. She knew that the only way to save Zach was to destroy the mirror. Everything bad that had ever happened in that house, and the bad feeling in the air, all came together to focus on that mirror. John wouldn't let her do it, and Sarah realized that this was the moment their lives might be saved or totally ruined. Zach disappeared into the mirror, and Sarah realized that she had to do whatever it took to get him back, even if it meant destroying everything that threatened her family. But now, a dark force, more dangerous than the house itself, stood between them and their salvation. Sarah stood in front of the mirror, her hands cold and shaking with worry, her heart beating so hard in her chest that it felt like it was going to burst. Tears began to well up in her eyes, but she stopped herself, realizing that if she didn't break the mirror, she would lose her son forever. She had always thought the mirror was impenetrable. Her eyes flashed with images of Zach disappearing, of his image dissolving more and more into the reflection, and she couldn't stop it. She didn't think about anything else. Everything around her seemed unreal, as if the world was shattering, and she couldn't return to reality until she saved her son.
This can't go on.
She whispered in desperation.
I will destroy you.
She grabbed the candlestick with both hands and raised it, fury in her eyes, pointing it at the mirror. She hurled the candlestick at the mirror. It all happened very quickly. the candlestick flew through the air and hit the mirror with a loud, sharp sound. Sarah froze, expecting to hear the glass shatter, but the mirror didn't shatter. Instead, it just bounced the candlestick's bright light back at her. The candlestick stopped in midair, as if it had absorbed the impact on its own. The mirror remained intact, without a scratch. It looked like a wall of glass, a Y that prevented any outside influence from penetrating it. Sarah stood in a daze, unable to believe her eyes. She looked again at the mirror and saw that her reflection was distorted, as if it didn't match reality. She felt a cold sweat on her forehead. The mirror was not like ordinary glass. It didn't shatter. It didn't break. It had to be broken in a different way.
How is that possible?
She whispered, her voice full of fear and confusion. The candlestick lay on the floor, undamaged, and the mirror stared back at her with a merciless emptiness. She felt confused and afraid. She felt that she couldn't destroy the mirror. It was much older than she could have imagined, and it was different from anything she knew. She realized that she had to do something special to break the mirror. She knew it would take more than just physical strength. She looked at the mirror again, feeling desperate. She could feel its power coursing through her, and she felt more and more helpless in front of it. She passed out from all this emotional stress. When she woke up in her bedroom the next morning, she didn't immediately realize what had happened. She went into the living room, where there was a mirror with a slumped John and baby Emily sitting next to it. Sarah felt a cold sweat run down her back. She knew something had to be done.
The priest.
She had a thought. She realized she needed help. She couldn't handle it by herself. The mirror's power was too strong. She knew that to defeat the evil in the mirror, she would need the help of someone who knew how to resist the unholy forces. She ran to the phone, grabbed it off the nightstand, and dialed the priest's number. But she knew that breaking the mirror would require more than just her strength. It wasn't just a mirror. It was a gateway to another world. Only those who knew how to deal with such evil could defeat it. When Sarah and the priest returned to the house, it was night. There was not a sound outside. It was completely silent. It felt like death had come to the house. In that silence, she felt something looming, something that shouldn't exist. The mirror in the room didn't look any different from before, but something was off. It seemed to sense their presence. Sarah could barely breathe, and she couldn't look away from the strange mirror. The mirror seemed to be alive, as if it was searching for something. She felt it looking at her, as if it could penetrate her. The priest began his preparations. He arranged candles in the corners of the room and placed a scroll of spells on the table. Sarah watched him, her mind filled with fear and worry. But now she had no other choice. She had to do something.
Are you ready?
The priest asked, his voice calm, but there was a hint of unease in it. He knew that this ritual was more than just a spell. It was a battle against the very evil that existed outside of time and space.
Yes. Zach has to come back.
Sarah replied, her voice shaking with nerves. She wasn't sure she was ready, but she couldn't back down. The priest knelt down and began to recite prayers slowly, like he was casting an incantation. Each word was filled with ancient power. He held a cross in his hands, which glistened in the dim candlelight. Sarah stood beside him, also on her knees, and began to follow his words, trying to focus on what was happening. But her mind wandered back to the mirror. In that dark mirror, she saw Zach's silhouette. His face was contorted with fear, and his hands reached for her but couldn't reach her. The priest's voice grew louder and more confident as he spoke, and his body trembled slightly from the effort. Sarah noticed that his face was covered in sweat.
You must focus. Let your faith be stronger than anything you see.
His eyes showed determination. Sarah closed her eyes and prayed. But as soon as she did, everything around her changed. She felt a chill, and something invisible entered the room. She realized it had come. Darkness began to fill the space, and the shadows that had begun to appear on the walls crept in, distorting their outlines. The light from the candles dimmed, as if the darkness itself was consuming it. She felt something cold and ancient creep up her spine. The house seemed to come to life. Its walls began to move, and its floor began to crack. She heard a creaking sound coming from somewhere in the shadows, from the very heart of that horrible mirror.
Zach!
She shouted, jumping to her feet. Her voice was full of fear. She saw his face reappear in the reflection, and her heart clenched. He was there, but it was as if he wasn't with them at all. It felt like he was trapped and couldn't be saved.
Zach, hold on!
The priest continued to recite spells, but Sarah could feel the shadows around them growing denser, as if they could take her over, swallow her up. Everything began to change shape. The space itself seemed unstable. The walls felt unstable, and there was a clear cracking sound. At first, it was barely noticeable, but it grew louder with each passing moment. Sarah looked at the mirror and saw the cracks spreading across its surface. It felt like a sign that something bad was about to happen. But something else was wrong with the mirror. It started to soak up the light. Dark shadows began to break out from within. Zach's face and distorted features began to change shape, as if he was part of that darkness. Parts of his personality dissolving into those shadows.
Don't stop! You must go on!
Sarah shouted to the priest. Meanwhile, John and Emily came down from the second floor. Emily was frightened by what she saw and ran back to her room, but John stopped and began to observe what was happening. However, in an instant, inexplicable things began to happen to him. John began to show signs of being possessed. The shadows in the mirror were pulling him toward them. Sarah noticed how his eyes took on a strange, glassy glint. He stood still, his hands clenched into fists, and started to move toward the mirror.
No!
Sarah shouted, turning toward John. He was out of breath, and she knew that if he got too close to the mirror, he would become part of it. She ran up to him and tried to stop him, but he pushed her away with unnatural force. The priest, noticing this, got to his feet and shouted,
John, stop! You can't!
But John didn't listen. He was completely under the dark power of the mirror, as if it were guiding him. Sarah quickly grabbed the lamp from the nearest table and threw it at the mirror. The impact was very loud, and the lamp bounced away as if the glass were very strong. The mirror itself didn't shatter, but its surface turned red, and Sarah felt the dark energy grow even stronger. With desperation in her eyes, she looked at the priest and said,
I can't stop it!
You can't, but you can destroy the mirror if your faith is strong enough.
At that moment, John took another step toward the mirror. Suddenly, the mirror began to tremble and crack, but John, as if in a trance, did not stop. He took another step toward the mirror.
There's no time here, Sarah! We have to be united in this!
The priest shouted. Sarah, feeling her heart beat very fast, closed her eyes, hoping to calm down. All she could think about was Zach, his distorted face in the mirror, his praying eyes that showed her the pain and emptiness she felt. She focused on him like he was the only thing keeping her from going crazy. She spoke the words of a prayer, her lips barely moving. These words, which had once seemed simple, now felt like sounds that could break this world and transport them to a reality without pain or fear. But despite her efforts, Sarah could feel the space around her begin to distort, as if reality itself was trying to shift. Everything was hazy, and evil was everywhere. She didn't see John, consumed by his obsession, move closer to the mirror. His whole body was trapped by the distorted energy, and his eyes, empty of all emotion, stared through her into nothingness. His steps were heavy, as if he himself were under the control of something else, something far more ancient and sinister than anything the human mind could comprehend. At that moment, time stood still. Sarah felt it first, the sudden and complete absence of sounds. Even the priest's breathing stopped, as if time and air had lost their power. The candlelight crackled, and for a moment it was so bright that Sarah had to squeeze her eyes shut. The light was so bright that it seemed like the air around them could catch on fire. Each spark flaring in the darkness seemed to symbolize the struggle of their will against forces that should never have been called into this world. The mirror in front of them, reflecting their scared faces, began to shake. Sarah felt its surface seem to shrink, as if it were stretched to its limit, ready to break. At that moment, she saw John, as if an unknown force was pulling him closer and closer to the mirror. He couldn't stop. Sarah screamed, but she was drowned out by the sudden noise in the room. At the same time, the light around them flared brightly, as if the candle fire itself had reached its limit. It was more than just light. It was a blinding, burning light that seemed to scorch the air. Sarah looked up at the priest. His eyes showed determination. He did not back down, and he did not pay any attention to the approaching evil. He knew that if they didn't do this now, they would all be lost. Faith burned in his eyes, and he felt a strange, powerful force that seemed to be their only hope against the evil around them. Suddenly, something was breaking in the air. Sarah felt her body clench as if she were part of that rupture. The mirror shattered into giant cracks that seemed to cut through space, growing more and more intense. The mirror began to crack, and the cracks weren't just physical damage. It was as if the very essence of the world was splitting apart right then. Each cracking sound seemed to release something dark, but it also released those who were here. John, as if he couldn't hear anything around him, as if he was part of this destruction, fell to his knees. His face, frozen in a contorted mask of fear, lost its former shape. And in that moment, Sarah felt the darkness that had enveloped him recede. He was free, but something had changed in his eyes. His soul was devastated. He was not the John she remembered. He was broken, like a mirror. Sarah took his hand and felt the coldness that had bothered her go away. This wasn't just a release from a curse. It was a release from something much deeper and more horrible. The evil was gone, but it left its mark, like a disease that had just receded, leaving emptiness and pain.
How are you? Are you back?
Yes, I'm back. But I don't know what to do now. I feel empty.
Sarah, feeling everything around her begin to fill with silence again, looked at the priest. He was still standing with a look of strength and weariness. He looked tired, but also like he had won something. After the mirror broke, it was as if the air around him was full of tension. Sarah stood holding John's hand while his body was still and unmoving, as if he was still held captive by an invisible force. The priest, wiping sweat from his forehead, finally started to move forward. He was exhausted, but his gaze was still determined. Sarah looked around, and her attention immediately went to the mirror, which was now just a mess of shards shining in the dim light. The mirror no longer reflected Zach's image. It no longer reflected terror, but something continued to hang in the air, lingering and heavy.
Zach, where are you?
Sarah whispered, her voice full of despair. The priest raised his hand, and Sarah noticed his eyes filled with concern. He walked over to the pieces of the mirror, and his eyes focused intently, as if searching for something. He didn't say anything, his hands moving over the mirror's glazed surface, picking up the shards. Sarah felt like she couldn't wait much longer. Zach was still there, trapped in the mirror, and she had to help him. She took a step forward, as if following her inner urge.
Zach? Zach, can you hear me?
She shouted again, her voice ringing in the silence. The light in the room grew brighter, but this time it wasn't fear. This light felt different. It was full of hope. At that moment, Sarah felt the air around her begin to gradually fill with a familiar chill. Zach had appeared. His figure appeared as if out of nowhere, barely visible at first, then more and more clearly, as if his body had been pulled from the misty space behind the mirror. His face was pale and tense, but when he saw Sarah, his eyes softened, and he looked grateful. His voice was barely audible, but she felt it deep in her heart. Zach was finally in front of her. Sarah buried her face in his hair and embraced him as if he were her salvation, her long-awaited return from the darkest place from which there was no escape. She felt warm and relieved.
You're back, Zach,
she said, her voice almost breaking as she wept quietly, and he wrapped his arms around her, his own voice cracking with emotion. His eyes showed fear, but he was alive. He was with her, and that was all she needed. The priest, who had been watching them closely, looked away. He knew that the force that had held Zach in that mirror had now gone away.
You saved him. But what you have endured, it wasn't just a coincidence.
The priest said quietly, but with a respectful tone. He looked around the room and said,
It was your strength, your faith, and your hard work. You have a long road ahead of you to heal.
Sarah looked at John. His face was pale and tired, but his eyes no longer had that wild shine in them. He was here with them, and that was what mattered.
You're back, Zach? We're all back,
John said, his voice tired but hopeful. Light footsteps came down the staircase. At the bottom, Emily paused, peering cautiously around the corner of the wall, one wary eye searching the room. She saw them, her mother on the floor, the priest standing quietly by the window, Zach safe in her arms, and her face slowly broke into a smile of pure relief. She rushed across the room and threw her arms around her brother.
You're alive, Zach,
she said. She held his hand tightly, feeling her world finally be restored, despite all the horror she had experienced. And Sarah felt their family become whole again. But the whole family was different now. The ordeal had made them stronger, but also harder.
The story ends here. The next one is already waiting. Subscribe to Studio 611.